Food is often the first thing that's cut from somebody's budget. I think it's easy for us to say, like, why are people don't know how to cook, or people don't know how to eat healthy, when the reality is, like, they might not have the option. Dane County passed a resolution saying that food is a human right for all residents in Dane County. After passing that resolution, there hasn't been much progress made in making that a reality for people. REAP is uniquely positioned to do this work because we've been in the community doing food systems thought work and also on the ground work for 25 years. Hello, my name is Noah Bloedorn. I'm the interim executive director at REAP Food Group, and I'm interested in building local food systems here in Dane County in Wisconsin. And this is The Layered Onion. I am sort of amazed by how often people say they don't have time to cook or to make food for themselves. That is like the constant biggest barrier across race, across income, across rural or urban divide. Nobody feels like they have time to cook food. And so it really makes me think about, like, as a society, where we're at with our relationship with food and our relationship to things like work. And what is taking all of that time. Maybe it's also our relationship to things like phones, or things that just take away from what is meant to be a really communal part of our lives, which is making food and eating food together. And I think as a society, we've completely lost that relationship. Or I shouldn't say completely. There's plenty of people who are experiencing that, but it is not the norm. My background is in urban planning. And we had a really great town hall last night with a planner from Dane County Public Health. And he was talking about planning as sort of the language of governments, where as an entity, whether it's the city of Madison, Dane County, or any other municipal area, the systems that we're working with are incredibly complex. And so in order to navigate those systems, right, like a great example is in food systems, as a community, we have values related to building a local food economy, having a healthy public, making sure people have access to food. Those are really complex systems. And so the way that we can navigate and make changes in those systems is by creating a plan. Another great metaphor that we talked about last night was a jigsaw puzzle. In Dane County specifically, we have a lot of incredible farmers. We have a lot of incredible farm-to-table restaurants, farmers markets. We have all these pieces of a puzzle that have created a strong food system here, but it's not a food system that everybody can access. And so what the food plan hopes to do is create a 30,000-foot view of the complete puzzle and start putting those pieces into place such that we can build a regional food system. Directly working on the plan, REAP Food Group is managing the project. And then we contract with the Dane County Food Collective to do entrepreneur outreach. We contract with Wisconsin Food Systems, Inc. to do outreach related to infrastructure in our food system. We also contract with a woman named Abba Tucker, who is doing consumer outreach. She has deep connections with the community and is really making sure that this plan highlights different voices throughout the community to understand what their needs are. And then we also work with UW Extension and this Madison Food Policy Council and the Dane County Food Council as well. What we're basing this food plan in, which I want everybody to know, is that in 2012, Dane County passed a resolution saying that food is a human right for all residents in Dane County. After passing that resolution, there hasn't been much progress made in making that a reality for people. And we see this plan as getting us from where we currently are to a future where food is a human right for all residents. Food as a human right means that all people have access to food in the deepest sense. They have access to things like the production of food. They have access to foods that they want to eat. They have the time and resources to make that food or purchase that food as they wish. It is intrinsic as human beings that we all need food to survive, and everybody should have access to the food that they want to have available to them. We're in sort of a scary position, I would say, where 13% of our county is facing food insecurity, meaning that they're having trouble accessing food. They might not be eating enough meals a day to meet their personal needs. Um, in that same reality, we're seeing a lot of budget cuts to address that need. And so I think where we are today is a food system that is really centered around profit making. And it's led to great disparities across our community in who can access food and who profits from the food system. What a food system that values food as a human right looks like to me is that there are many other values that we place in our food system that drives how food gets from farm to your plate. And those values can look like a lot of things, but to me, it's valuing the health of our environment, the health of our community, public health, how we're doing as individuals in our relationship to food. It also looks like creating strong local economies and any other values that we might hold as a community. I think the reality is it's a complex system. I was telling you before that we live in a food system with great disparities, right? And so in Dane County alone, 95% of the food that we grow here is grown not for human consumption. It's for commodity crops. So we have all this amazing agricultural land around us that's growing food that we don't eat. And in the same reality, we have people like you're talking about who are working hard. They don't have a lot of time, and they're having trouble accessing food. So at the city and county level, at this food systems level, we're really talking about how do we change this system so that we're growing more food for ourselves. And when we're doing that more locally and can really prioritize people who are struggling to eat food, I think that access becomes better, so to speak. And so I think realistically, as we think about this, we're thinking about how do we move that needle maybe to 90% and 10%, and just slowly make those changes. And so one area where I see there being a real possibility for change is that the city and county own land, agricultural land that is in use and is in use to produce commodity crops. How do we shift that land? Because the city and county care about transitioning away from commodity. It's not a ton of land, but if you were to convert, it's certainly not a ton of land in terms of commodity crop growing.
Right.
It could probably move a couple percentage points of local food production at that level that we were talking about.
So what's the barriers to making that happen?
I think it's just a transition of priorities from the city and county. And so, as I was saying before, planning is the language that city and counties speak. And so this food plan is providing language to the county to say, actually, we prioritize growing food for local consumption. And we've stated that through this planning process. So now we're going to transition and deprioritize commodity crop growing on our lands and prioritize local food production on those lands. We could use a lot of money to build this infrastructure, but doing something like transitioning city and county owned farmland, it would just take us installing some wells, which costs money, but it isn't a huge expense. We currently don't have a food systems planning department at the city and county level. I think food systems planning exists through REAP Food Group right now. I think it's essential to moving this work forward. I think REAP is uniquely positioned to do this work because we've been in the community doing food systems thought work and also on the ground work for 25 years. And there are other organizations that do food systems work, but have a real niche within that, whether that's working with CSA farmers, working with farm to school programs, or gardeners in our community. But REAP sort of has this 30,000 foot view and is uniquely positioned to do policy work while we're also doing on the ground work. We've done a great job in Madison and Dane County of creating a local food system for people who can afford it. The farmers markets are great. The co-ops are great. We have great farm to table restaurants. That's all there. The next part of this movement is to scale it up to a level that feeds the entire community. And we're going to approach that by addressing the needs of the people who are most vulnerable first, through emergency food systems, through schools, through hospitals. That's where the community eats food on a large scale. And so we're going to provide that local food to those institutions. This all ties in a lot of ways to poverty. food is often an early indicator that somebody is impoverished, their access to food. And food is often the first thing that's cut from somebody's budget to make ends meet. And so when we think about the rising cost of housing in a place like Madison and Dane County, what we're seeing on the other end is that means people are cutting meals out of their budget so that they can stay housed. And so as that continues to exacerbate on a community level, what happens when people dive into poverty, issues with addiction and mental health issues, being unhoused, all of these things prop up as well. What does shaming people's choices related to food look like when maybe they don't really have a choice in the food that they're eating? And, I think it's easy for us to say, like, why are people don't know how to cook, or people don't know how to eat healthy, when the reality is, like, they might not have the option in any way to do that, and they might be doing the best they can and still facing the consequences of eating that unhealthy food. Basically, what we're seeing is, like, in poorer communities, that access to food is really low. We've been doing surveys on the South Side and Allied Drive community in Madison, and I was sort of stunned by the amount of people who take cabs to go and get their groceries. And there's a program currently for that community to access those cabs and go away. But the reality is there's nowhere to walk to get the groceries you need. And these people might not have access to cars. There's probably not a direct bus route to get to the grocery stores they need to go to. And so I think that's a really great example of proximity. You talked about in rural areas, might take you 30 minutes to get to the nearest grocery store. People don't have time to do these kind of things. And so food becomes this, like I said earlier, both in terms of a budget process, food is often the first thing to get cut. But in a proximity and a time aspect too, we're going to lean towards having convenient food before prioritizing food that might take time to make or involve bringing multiple people together to make it all happen. A part of this plan that I'm really passionate about, and sort of this theory about doing work on the ground while also doing policy work at the same time. And one way that we did this on this food action plan is going out to the Prairie Crossing apartments in Allied Drive in South Madison, where a lot of the people living in those apartments are having a hard time accessing food. There's literally a pantry in the apartment complex that is having a hard time filling its shelves, but they have grass right on the outside of their apartments. And a part of this process, we went to those apartments to understand what the residents' needs were to translate into the food plan. But we also built community gardens with those residents because that was something they needed and something they wanted to do. So earlier this spring, we went out there. We brought a crew of people out there to clear out the grass, create those garden plots, and work alongside those residents to start planting the food that they wanted to see in their pantry. Just last week, we had people who went back to the site and just sort of expounded on how much bounty is in those community garden plots. What was just grass a year before and people who couldn't access food is now an entire field of food grown for human consumption, and a space of community for those residents who are coming together and fixing the problem related to food access that they had. I think it's a perception that people have that, the single mother with 2 jobs can't do any of this stuff. And I don't think it's true. I think it is a level of priority, and there's plenty of people in our community who don't have a lot of money. I'm right now farming with friends who we've gotten land given to us by a farmer who has too much land, can't do it all themselves. And they have people come out to their land. They have no money. They just want to help out on the farm and grab some food for themselves. There are plenty of people in our community who are doing this work. And I think there's this perception that it's not possible. And certainly, our society isn't set up to make that feel possible for people, but it is. And it takes some intentionality about accessing those things. So if you're interested in learning more about REAP, you can find us at reapfoodgroup.org. And you can also follow REAP Madison on Facebook and Instagram. My name is Noah Bloedorn. I work for Reap Food Group as the interim executive director, and I'm interested in building local food systems here in Dane County and the state of Wisconsin. And this has been The Layered Onion.